Lena Parker thought she had planned the perfect murder. Daniel Parker never saw it coming. Victor Hale promised $30 million that never existed. And now, someone else knows everything. What begins as a cold-blooded plot to cash in on a fake inheritance spirals into a twisted game of deception, blackmail, and a killer's worst fear being outplayed. In the shadows of this so-called accident, a fifth name waits to be revealed, watching, listening, and pulling strings. This is the story of how greed turned deadly, and how the dead never stay silent. Lena Parker had always known life was a game of appearances. From her early 20s, she mastered the art of curating the perfect image, immaculate Instagram posts, glowing reviews for her boutique, carefully staged date nights with her husband Daniel. But behind the filtered smiles and glossy surface, there was restlessness, an itch that no new bag or vacation could soothe. Lena had ambitions far bigger than her suburban surroundings in Falls Church, Virginia. And slowly, that hunger began to consume her. Daniel, on the other hand, was content with the simple things. A quiet man with kind eyes and a gentle heart, he adored Lena. He'd built his real estate business from scratch, taking pride in every home he sold, every family he helped move in. But real estate had its ups and downs, and the last year had been especially rough. Interest rates had climbed, the market cooled. Daniel remained optimistic, but Lena felt the weight of every unpaid credit card bill. Her boutique was barely scraping by. She didn't tell Daniel how deep in debt she truly was. What made it worse was the constant comparison. Friends she once considered equals were now posting selfies in Santorini, flashing designer watches, throwing lavish baby showers. Lena watched it all unfold with growing bitterness. She'd married for love, yes, but now, love wasn't paying the bills. What good was a faithful husband if they were drowning? One evening, long after Daniel had gone to sleep, Lena sat curled up on the living room couch, her laptop glowing in the dark. She wasn't looking for anything in particular, just scrolling through forums, desperate for a spark, an idea, anything that could change their fortune. That's when she stumbled upon a comment on a financial blog. It was from a user named Hale Global, who claimed to help people uncover lost international assets and inheritance pathways. The comment included a link and a cryptic message. Your future may already belong to you, you just haven't claimed it yet. Lena clicked, half out of boredom, half out of curiosity. The website was surprisingly professional, nothing flashy, just a dark, elegant landing page with a quote about destiny and discretion. A contact form waited at the bottom. She almost closed the tab, but then she hesitated. What was the harm in asking? She typed in her name, her email, and just for the fun of it, Daniel's full name. No phone number, no address, just a shot in the dark. She didn't expect a reply, but the next morning, there it was, an email from Victor. He addressed her formally, thanked her for reaching out, and claimed that after a preliminary search, Daniel Parker's name matched a pending international estate, registered in the Netherlands, tied to an old shipping magnate who'd passed without a direct heir. The amount? Undisclosed, but substantial, Victor wrote, possibly generational. Lena's heart pounded as she read. She knew it had to be fake. These things were always scams, but something about the tone of the message felt different. It was formal, detailed, and strangely confident. No flashy promises, just enough to plant a seed. She replied, asking for more information. Victor responded promptly with a PDF, a scanned document of what looked like a family trust tree. Daniel Parker's name was circled. The document had seals, dates, even legal notations in Dutch. Lena didn't understand most of it, but it looked real, too real. Still, she told herself it didn't mean anything. Daniel wouldn't just inherit money out of nowhere. But later that night, while cooking dinner, she found herself staring at her husband. His smile, the way he folded the kitchen towel just so, the hum of a song he didn't know he was singing. And then she wondered, what if it's true? What if this was the universe handing her a golden key? And then another thought crept in. Quiet, unwelcome, but persistent. What if she didn't have to share it? Lena couldn't sleep that night. She lay awake listening to Daniel's steady breathing, staring at the ceiling, thinking about ships, inheritance, and a man named Victor Hale who knew more about her husband than she did. Something had been set in motion, and whether it was real or not, she wasn't about to look away. Lena spent the next several days in a strange trance, torn between disbelief and dangerous hope. She told no one, not Daniel, not her closest friends, not even the anonymous women she sometimes chatted with in private debt forums. Victor Hale's emails kept coming, each one more detailed than the last. He explained that the inheritance claim was part of a dormant European estate fund, waiting for a legal beneficiary to surface. The original holder, Willem van Doren, had died childless, leaving behind a tangled chain of assets scattered across old accounts, land deeds, and offshore investments. According to Victor, after years of attempted outreach, international estate regulators had begun releasing claims to extended kin. Daniel's maternal grandfather, it turned out, had once lived in Amsterdam before immigrating to the U.S. That detail, pulled from a document Victor attached, made Lena sit up in bed the night she read it. She remembered Daniel once mentioning a Dutch relative. She'd barely listened then, now it felt like a sign. Victor was patient. He offered to walk Lena through every step of the process, beginning with a confidential power of attorney agreement that would allow him to prepare a full estate claim under Daniel's name. But there was a catch. Everything had to be submitted under the assumption that Daniel was uninvolved and uncontactable, due to the sensitivity of dormant estate laws in international finance. The words sounded heavy, yet official. Lena didn't fully understand what it meant, but she knew what it implied. Daniel couldn't know. If he remained out of the picture, the money could be transferred directly to the spouse. To her, Lena reread the sentence over and over. Each time, it felt more like a dare than a detail. She began to imagine what life could look like with that kind of money. $30 million, Victor estimated in one email based on preliminary evaluations of assets once liquidated. Lena pictured new beginnings in coastal cities, private accounts, a boutique chain with flagship stores. She imagined shedding the version of herself that clipped coupons and dodged calls from creditors. This could be the end of that life. Still, she hesitated. The idea of removing Daniel from the process completely felt wrong. They had built a life together. But as she scrolled through her phone late one night and saw another overdraft alert, her hesitation began to erode. Victor wasn't just selling a dream, he was offering a roadmap. He attached a full timeline, one that ended with Lena Parker receiving verified clearance of the estate by mid-spring. First came document filing, then identity vetting, then legal certification. All manageable steps. The only unusual requirement was the final release condition. Claimant must be the sole surviving next of kin. The words chilled her. Victor said it plainly in his next message. If your husband is alive, you are not eligible to inherit directly. The claim would become entangled in shared approvals and stall for years. That sentence changed everything. Lena's thoughts grew darker. She began noticing small things. How often Daniel jogged alone at night. How often he forgot to check the brakes on his car. How often he left his coffee cup unattended while reading in the morning. She didn't act. But her mind turned over these details like puzzle pieces, arranging and rearranging. One day, Daniel came home smiling, excited about a new listing. He kissed her cheek, and started telling her about the couple he'd just met. Lena nodded, smiled, laughed at the right moment. But something had shifted. She no longer heard what he was saying. She only saw the space he took up in her world, the way his presence blocked the door she now desperately wanted to open. When she went to bed that night, she checked her inbox again. Victor had sent another message. Estate filing readiness confirmed. Awaiting next instruction. Let me know when you're ready. Lena stared at the screen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She didn't reply. Not yet. But something inside her already. Winter had begun to settle into Virginia, casting long shadows over the quiet streets and fogging up the windows of the Parker home. Inside, everything looked normal. Daniel sipping tea before work, Lena folding laundry, soft jazz playing in the background. But beneath the surface there was a storm brewing. Lena had made a decision. The point of no return was behind her now, though she told herself it was still just an idea, a dark whisper she could choose to ignore. But she didn't ignore it. She began studying, watching documentaries about accidental deaths, reading online forums about insurance investigations, learning about car failures and brake line damage. She wasn't a criminal, but she was clever and desperate. That combination made her dangerous. She started small, tracing Daniel's routines, noting when he drove, how fast, which roads he favored. He had a habit of taking a scenic drive along the Ridge Highway on his way home, especially after long days. He said the view helped him unwind. Lena now saw that road as something else entirely, a solution. When Victor emailed again asking if she was prepared to proceed, she replied with one word. Within the hour he sent over what looked like legal forms, asset transfer authorizations, a signed letter of intent, and a final clause that chilled her: confirmation of deceased kin. It was blank. She printed the documents and tucked them away, her hands trembling. The plan had to look natural. It had to be clean, an accident that made sense. No raised eyebrows, no loose threads. Lena researched mechanics and found an old forum post, detailing how brake fluid could be slowly drained to simulate a system failure over time. A subtle leak, nothing explosive, just enough to kill. One quiet afternoon while Daniel was out, Lena entered the garage and opened the hood of his sedan. Her heart pounded so loud it was hard to think, but she kept going. She wore gloves. She used an old turkey baster, and a thin tube she'd bought online under the name Anna Collins. Her movements were precise, not rushed. By the time Daniel came home that night, everything was back in place. He kissed her on the forehead. She hugged him longer than usual. The days passed slowly after that. Each time Daniel left in the car, Lena stood by the window watching, waiting. Would it happen today, tomorrow? She didn't know how long it would take for the leak to build to failure. That uncertainty gnawed at her but also comforted her. It gave her a layer of distance from the act itself. On the seventh day, it happened. Daniel's car was found at the bottom of a wooded cliffside, just beyond the scenic overlook. A truck driver had seen tire marks and called it in. The sedan was barely recognizable. Rescue crews arrived quickly, but there was nothing to be done. The police ruled it an accident. Weather conditions were foggy, the road slick. Brake failure was noted in the initial report. A tragedy, but not suspicious. Lena wept in front of camera. She accepted the casserole dishes, the quiet hugs, the whispered condolences. She played her part with precision, the grieving widow, strong but broken. But beneath her composed exterior, a different kind of fire was burning. It was done. Victor congratulated her in a short, emotionless email. He instructed her to begin transferring the processing fees necessary to release the funds: $10,000 for international clearance, another $15,000 for legal certification. She wired it without hesitation, the first payment, then the second. She even sold some jewelry Daniel had given her just to speed the process. A week later, Victor said the estate release was underway. Lena could almost feel the weight of the money in her hands. She didn't think of Daniel anymore, only of what was coming, until of course it did. The days after Daniel's funeral passed like a blur. Lena moved through them with practiced grace, her voice low, her eyes glassy, her movements slow and deliberate. Friends admired her strength, some even praised her resilience. Beneath the quiet sympathy, no one suspected the truth. She had done the unthinkable and walked away unscathed, or so she believed. The first signs of unraveling were so subtle, Lena didn't notice them. A delayed email from Victor, a missed call that went straight to voicemail, minor, easily explained. Victor had said the money was being transferred through several offshore entities, each requiring documentation and clearance. There were delays, he warned, but nothing unexpected. Lena believed him. She had to. Then came the second round of fees, $25,000 for foreign tax compliance. She didn't question it, just took out a private loan using her boutique as collateral. The forms Victor sent looked as official as the first: digital stamps, notarized insignias, names of international banks she couldn't pronounce. But days turned into weeks. The promised clearance confirmation never arrived. She emailed Victor twice, then 3 times. No response. She tried calling the number he'd used before. It was disconnected. The website she'd once visited now led to an error page. Her stomach sank. Still, she told herself it couldn't be a scam. Not after all she'd done. She opened her laptop and went back to the original email thread. Reading every message, she compared the estate documents again, searching for clues, inconsistencies, anything that might explain the silence. The files looked so real, the timeline, the signatures, the diagrams of the estate's financial holdings, but now they felt hollow. She began Googling the legal firm Victor had mentioned in the early emails. Nothing. No address. No website. She called the Dutch consulate, pretending to be inquiring on behalf of a deceased family member's estate. The woman on the other end gently told her there was no such registry, no case number, no Willem van Doren with an open inheritance file. Lena sat in silence for a long time. Her mouth went dry. She reached back out to Victor, this time with a single line. "Where is the money?" No reply. The next day she tried again. "You said everything was ready. I did what you asked." Still nothing. By the third day of silence, Lena stopped pretending. She wasn't just being ghosted, she was being erased. Her pulse thudded in her ears as she opened her banking app and stared at the numbers. She'd sent more than $60,000 to Victor's offshore accounts. Money she didn't have, now tied to loans and debt she couldn't repay. And worst of all, there was nothing. No inheritance, no confirmation, no man named Victor Hale. Her hands trembled as she opened Daniel's photo album. There he was, smiling on their last vacation, sitting by the lake, laughing under the summer sun. He'd trusted her, loved her, died at her hands, and she had done it for a fantasy. She wanted to scream, to run, to tear everything down, but instead she stood in the middle of the room, numb, not with guilt she had buried that deep, but with fear. The police had ruled it an accident, no one suspected anything, but now, there was a trail, a digital footprint, a money trail, a mountain of emails she couldn't erase, and in the background, somewhere out in the world, Victor was gone, a ghost, a lie with a name. The walls were closing in, she could feel it, and worse, she couldn't even tell anyone what had happened. How could she? What would she say? That she killed her husband for money that didn't exist, that she'd been manipulated by a stranger she never met. The truth was, she didn't know what was worse, the fact that she had murdered Daniel, or that she had done it all for nothing. Lena woke every morning with a knot in her stomach, as if her body was warning her before her mind had time to remember. Each day began the same: coffee she didn't finish, emails she didn't want to read, and a growing panic she could no longer suppress. The boutique she once loved now felt like a prison, quiet, understocked, and haunted by bills she couldn't afford to pay. Her employees sensed something was wrong. She'd started forgetting to reorder items, missing appointments, showing up in wrinkled clothes and blank stares. The walls were closing in. She avoided mirrors. They had become reminders of what she had become, not just a widow, but a fraud, a murderer, and worst of all, a fool. She replayed Victor's messages over and over in her mind. The perfect tone, the professionalism, the quiet authority that made her believe it was all real. He knew exactly what to say, when to say it, and how to bait her without pushing too hard, and she fell for it. Every search for Victor Hale led to dead ends. The email account had been deleted. The website domain was now up for sale. She tried hiring a local tech expert, claiming she needed to track a lost business contact. He couldn't help. The offshore accounts were untraceable. She even considered going to the police, fabricating a story that Victor had defrauded her and Daniel before his death, but the timeline didn't fit. The risk was too great. They'd ask questions, they'd dig, and if they dug they'd find more than she could hide. One night, unable to sleep, she found herself driving to the Ridge Highway, the place where Daniel's car had gone over. She stood at the edge of the overlook, staring down into the ravine. The moon was high, the forest still. There were no tire marks now, no broken branch. The earth had begun to heal itself. Unlike her, suddenly, headlights appeared in the distance. A car slowed beside her. Lena's breath caught in her throat, but it was just a highway patrol officer on his usual round. He nodded at her, rolled down the window, and asked if she was okay. She forced a smile and nodded. When he drove off, the panic didn't fade. In fact, it grew. That brief interaction reminded her that she was always just one question away from everything unraveling. Back home, Lena poured herself a drink, then another. She stared at the financial statements scattered across the kitchen table. She was down to less than $8,000 in liquid assets, and the boutique loan would default in weeks. She had no backup plan, no secret reserve. The only fortune she had ever believed in had been a lie, and yet the nightmare wasn't finished. 2 days later, an envelope arrived. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Printed in the center, in bold black font, were 7 words. How much was your husband worth, Lena? Her knees went weak. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the page. She looked out the window, half expecting someone to be watching from the street, but it was quiet, ordinary. She read the sentence again. Someone new, but who? Was it Victor, coming back to squeeze more money from? Was it someone who had followed her movements? Had she been careless? The fear that had once been buried beneath greed now rose to the surface with a vengeance. Paranoia set in. She began checking over her shoulder, locking every door twice, reading faces like threat. The nightmare hadn't ended with Daniel's death. It was only just beginning. The envelope marked the beginning of Lena's unraveling. In the following days, she received 2 more, each more chilling than the last. The second contained a photograph, grainy, black and white, but unmistakable. It showed Lena in her garage, standing beside Daniel's car with the hood open. Her back was turned, but it was clearly her. The time stamp in the corner confirmed it, 2 days before the accident. The third envelope was smaller. Inside was a USB stick. She waited until nightfall to plug it into her laptop. The screen flashed, and a folder opened automatically. There were 3 files. One was a video, security camera footage of her purchasing a siphoning kit online. The second, a PDF containing all the emails she had exchanged with Victor Hale. The third was a voice memo, her own voice, recorded without her knowledge, speaking softly into her phone one late night. No one will suspect a thing. It'll just look like an accident. Lena froze. She didn't remember saying those words, but the voice was her own confession, sent back to haunt her. It was clear now someone had been watching her, tracking her every step. It wasn't just Victor. Someone else had access. Someone who had waited until just the right moment to strike. For the first time since Daniel's death, Lena felt true terror. Not fear of being caught, fear of the unknown. Whoever had sent the messages wasn't demanding anything. There were no threats, no ransom, just silence, and evidence. She began thinking the worst. Was this blackmail in slow motion? Was the person toying with her waiting for her to crack? Or was it something more personal? Someone close, someone she'd overlooked. She considered her employee Grace, who had been acting distant lately, or Daniel's best friend, Nathan, who had been unusually supportive since the accident. Could it be one of them? Maybe even Daniel himself had left behind clues, some kind of dead man's switch. Her paranoia evolved into obsession. She searched her home for hidden devices. She ripped open drawers, climbed into the attic, unscrewed wall plates. Nothing. One night, a 4th envelope arrived. This one contained only a single sentence. You were never the only one talking to Victor. Lena's breath caught in her throat. The meaning was clear. She hadn't just been the target of a scam. She had been a pawn in someone else's game. Someone else had been feeding Victor information, maybe even working with him. Maybe this whole thing had never been about the money at all. She stayed up all night, reading through every email again, every financial document, cross-referencing detail. She noticed small things she had overlooked before, phrases repeated across emails, strange grammar patterns, the sudden disappearance of Victor right after the final payment, and then it hit her. Victor Hale might not have existed at all. What if he was just a persona, a composite created by someone who knew her? Someone with access to her life, her insecurities, her marriage, someone who had planted the seed, waited for her to act, then disappeared, only to return now, not as an accomplice, but as a witness. The final blow came a week later. She returned home from a silent day at the boutique to find her door unlocked. Inside everything was untouched, except her laptop. It sat open on the kitchen table, the screen glowing. One new message had been typed into a blank document. Daniel never jogged alone. That was. Lena dropped into the chair, her heart racing. If what the message implied was true, someone else had been there, watching Daniel, following her, maybe even guiding this entire descent from the start. She stared at the blinking cursor for hours, unable to move, unable to think clearly. In her quest for wealth, she had destroyed everything, and now someone else held the power to destroy her. The money never existed, but the trap had been real all along.